Welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. When you're ready to transform your sales for today's transforming market, we've got you covered with your host, the queen of cold calling and founder of Salesology, award-winning author, speaker, sales trainer, and coach, Wendy Weiss.
Hi, welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. And I'm your host, Wendy Weiss. I am the founder of Salesology and creator of the Salesology prospecting method. And I am also known as the queen of cold calling. Today, my very special guest is Rachel Cossar, and she is the CEO of Virtual Sapiens. And Rachel's a leader in the field of nonverbal communication and leadership presence facilitation. She's a former nationally ranked athlete and professional ballet dancer. And she has a knack for translating unique skills into relatable business skills and competencies. And Virtual Sapiens comes as an evolution of Rachel's combined work as the founder of Choreography for Business, which is a nonverbal communication consulting firm, as well as a faculty member with Mobius Executive Leadership, and a leadership presence facilitator with Ariel Group. She's also worked with leaders from GE, BCG, Pfizer, McKinsey, HBS, and more. So welcome, Rachel.
Thank you for having me, Wendy.
So happy that you are here today. And so let us begin where I always begin, which is at the beginning. Tell us your backstory. How did Virtual Sapiens, how did you come to be the CEO of Virtual Sapiens?
Sure. Yeah, it's so funny hearing you go through my bio because there are so many complicated words in that. I feel like I'm like, man, choreography for business and all this nonverbal communication and all that. But yeah, it's all related. So as you had gone through, I used to be a rhythmic gymnast. This was back when I was in Canada, and I was always doing ballet at the same time. Ended up with the fortunate experience of being a professional ballet dancer for 10 years at Boston Ballet. And unfortunately had to retire because of an injury, which, as you know, is a part of the job description sometimes. But I've always been very passionate about communication in its different forms. And nonverbal communication in particular, as a dancer, is the whole deal, right? Like you're going through these elaborate storylines and interesting relationships between characters evolving, and there's not a single word that is passed between the performers. And so I think it's maybe not so shocking when you hear that, to know that I then, once I retired, continued on in the realm of nonverbal communication, but found myself in more traditional work environments, right? Fundraising with nonprofits, relationship building in sales and things like that, and found a space for myself in that coaching environment. And then when the pandemic happened and communication went online over video, that was when I paused and thought, I think we could probably leverage some of this cutting edge technology, this artificial intelligence and computer vision, to bring an element of scale to what otherwise was very non-scalable training.
Okay. And so we're going to dive into all of that in just a moment. But first, I have to ask you, because as you know, and I believe many of my listeners know, I was also a ballet dancer. And I kind of believe that everything I know in life and business, I learned in ballet class. So what did you learn from being a dancer that helps you today, helps you help your clients, helps you build a business?
Yeah, I actually think there's this awareness that I think you develop as a dancer, especially when you're a dancer in the corps de ballet. And the corps de ballet, just to be clear for those who may not know, but the corps de ballet is it's the body of the company, right? The body of the ballet company. So it's the majority of the dancers in the company are part of the corps de ballet. And so I was in the corps de ballet my whole career. And you develop this awareness of not only the audience, but other team members, right? And I think that awareness really helps, or has helped me understand the different aspects of relationship building and other people's needs and kind of wants and desires. And I think that when it comes to selling, if you're aware of the other person and you put them in the front seat as the focus point, you end up being a little more successful. And I think that sometimes those sales can take a little longer, just because you're really building a sustainable relationship. But then it becomes a sustaining, sustainable relationship versus, like a one-off sale that doesn't renew.
Absolutely. And when you're dancing in a corps de ballet, which I also did, you have to know how to work as a team. Even if you hate all the other people and they hate you, somehow you still have to work together. The curtain goes up, 8:00, curtain goes up, you've got to work together. That's it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about nonverbal communication. What exactly does that mean, and why is it important?
Nonverbal communication really refers to anything that's sending a message that isn't words specifically. So most people think of nonverbal communication, they think of body language, they think of hand gestures, facial expressions, posture, eye gaze, eye contact. And that's all absolutely true. Those are some big metrics in the nonverbal communication space. But then the other things are like intonation, speech speed, pausing, what are you wearing? What accessories are you using? How are you walking? How are you shaking someone's hand? So there are all of these different cues and messages that we're sending all the time, whether we like it or not, whether we realize it or not, that aren't us actually having specific words come out of our mouths. And anything in that realm is nonverbal communication. And I think it's fascinating because on more than one occasion, I've had people say to me, nobody cares about body language. Like, why are you pursuing this like niche space? And it's so fascinating because I'm like, you literally, as humans, we cannot separate ourselves from nonverbal communication. It is such a primary evolutionary part of the way that we relate and the way that we move through our days. And it's such a foundationally human thing that I just think it's so funny when people are like, oh, why does nonverbal communication matter? No, it doesn't matter,
Oh my goodness. I've never had anybody say that to me, but I'm in your camp. Because as human beings, we read each other all the time. You meet someone and you immediately kind of scope them out and make a decision in like 30 seconds before either one of you have said a word.
Yeah.
And that could be a positive assessment. It could be a negative assessment.
Yeah.
It's just based on how they look, how they stand, the various nonverbal signals that are being given out. And I also really appreciate that you included intonation, rate of speed, because as someone that teaches prospecting and often telephone prospecting, the way that you say whatever it is you're saying is much more important than whatever it is you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, what are some of the things when we're talking about nonverbal communication? Can you give us some do's and some don'ts?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first question I think always is, what channel are you using to communicate? Because if you're in person, there are aspects of nonverbal communication that you have to pay very special attention to. And if you're over video, some of those things change. I think a lot of people do themselves a disservice when they think that, over video nonverbals, again, don't matter, or even over a phone call, to your point. Some people think that nonverbals don't matter, but there's so much more nuance in how we communicate beyond what we say that will influence the other person's emotional reception of what you say, right? And the way that your message lands. So like if, for example, we're taking the context of a video call, there are certain things that that you can do to, right from the get-go, right in that first moment of joining the call, convey a sense of composure, of confidence, of authority, of trust, right? Perceived trustworthiness that can help level set the conversation right from the beginning. And what I'm referring to specifically are things like, making sure that you've given yourself enough space between yourself and the lens, making sure that lens is at eye height, making sure that you can easily use your hand gestures without having to have your hands like up by your ears because your alignment to the lens is not proper. Making sure that you've been intentional about your background. You want to talk about a nonverbal that isn't body language, what's showing up in your background, right? Are you using a virtual background? And if so, what is that message sending? Is it like the Space Odyssey, or is it like a branded professional environment, right? And at the end of the day, it all still comes back to what message do you want to send to your audience instantaneously about who you are, the type of business you're doing, the type of partner you might be. And so many of those seemingly small details can speak volumes in terms of your preparedness and the amount of respect that you're giving the other person because you've taken the time to set yourself up properly, to set yourself up to have a compelling and interesting conversation with them.
So can you give us some examples, maybe success stories to go along with these do's and don'ts that you've just been talking about?
Yeah. So, even within our own team at Virtual Sapiens, right? We use AI to help professionals master their presence, and we do have a big focus on the video environment. There have been a number of occasions where we've had salespeople use our product. And even within the first assessment, like the first interaction with our AI, where we give you a baseline assessment, our AI basically acts like a supercharged mirror and will be like, here are all of the behaviors that you just did. And I remember on one occasion, one salesperson in particular, who does a lot of virtual selling, received the feedback from their baseline assessment. And we're just like, I had no idea that I hadn't been varying my facial expressions at all. So I was basically showing up to these virtual meetings and just, again, over relying or relying too much on what I was saying and not engaging with my face to the point where the energy and expression of my presence was really falling flat. Right. And we know from research that especially on video, if you're going to have a neutral facial expression, the perception is actually more negative over video than it would be in person, because we are missing a few other contextual nonverbal cues. And so that was a really interesting learning for this individual salesperson, who then went on to really practice the different varieties of facial expression that they would bring to their communication. And it doesn't mean smiling more. Right? It's not about just slapping a smile on your face and being like, oh, I guess I'll just smile 10 times this time and it'll be better. It's about leveraging your eyebrows. It's about showing empathy when someone's sharing a challenge, right? And which is why at Virtual Sapiens we look at facial expression variation and not just number of smiles.
Okay, so what is the difference between in-person and video?
There are so many differences. I think people often just try to replicate, or they try to replicate the feeling they get in person on video. And I'm like, no, it's so different. When you're in person, the perspective is 4-dimensional, or it's multisensory, right? You smell the person, you hear the person in different ways, you see them in a 3-dimensional state, right? On video, things can appear so much flatter, so much more flat. They can appear so much more disconnected, right? And that's especially true if you haven't, again, taken into consideration those things I said earlier, set yourself up so you can actually be a dynamic human on video, right? In person, if you're in the same room, you know that someone can see you, right? You don't have to ask oh, can you see me okay? Can you see the screen? La, 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 right? You know that the individual that you're meeting with understands the full context of the room that you're in. right? On video, your audience will only see what you show them. They'll only see what the lens picks up, which is an advantage in some ways because you can decide exactly what your audience sees. I have this great bookshelf. I've got my patent. I have this nice piece of art behind me. And those are all intentional decisions. No one has to see that I'm also in my baby, my 8-month-old baby's room, No one needs to see that. But also, if you're not being intentional about it and you're showing up on your couch, right? And it's obvious that you're kind of leaning back on your couch and your laptop's not on a stable surface and it's being jostled around as you're talking to someone. The messages you're sending in that case is that you don't really value the conversation enough to have put yourself in a professional setting with your right workspace, and that you kind of just took the call in between shows you were watching.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because if you were going to say a live conference or some kind of event, you would show up, I assume, dressed professionally and be prepared for what you're doing. You probably wouldn't show up in shorts and flip-flops, I assume. But lots of times on video, people are they're in their bedroom or wherever.
Yeah.
And it makes a different impression.
Absolutely. It's also, we're in a different time now. We're not in the pandemic anymore. During the pandemic, you had to kind of approach video with a little bit more leniency because some people didn't have, proper office setups. People's apartments weren't designed to support remote work. But now we're out of the pandemic and there's an option to go back into the office. There's an option to continue working from home. And there are benefits to both. But if you're going to be working from home, and this is, I think, something that needs to be discussed more at the organizational level, is what are the expectations you have of your sellers who are going to be showing up remotely, representing your company, your brand, your service, right? Those expectations have to be set and you have to support your sellers in being able to achieve those. Give them a stipend or a budget to outfit their remote office so that it reflects the level of professionalism you expect of them. Get them some training so that they are confident in the way that they show up on video. I think one of the things that surprised me a lot, and I'd be curious if you've heard the same thing, but a lot of people are oh, well, when I'm in the room with someone, I don't have a problem. It's very easy for me. It feels very natural, la, la, la. But then when I get on video, it feels very unnatural and I lose my confidence and I kind of stumble through things.
Yes, I have heard that. I've also heard the same thing. When I'm in front of somebody, I'm great, I'm comfortable, I'm able to build rapport, et cetera, et cetera. When I'm on the phone, I'm really uncomfortable and it doesn't work. So I've heard both things. So we're going to pause now for a word from our sponsor. When we come back, I would like to hear from you, because what I'm hearing, I know as a dancer, what we do is very intentional. You have a concert, you don't just run out on stage and start dancing. You've been there's a whole group of people working together to make this performance happen. And you're one of the pieces of that. And you've been rehearsing for months. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about your take on this idea of, they're just people that are born leaders. They're born salespeople. They're born knowing they know what to do and they can just do it. So, and then I also want to hear a little bit about your platform, because we haven't had a chance to talk about that. But now we are pausing for a word from our sponsor, the Salesology Vault. Just about every guest that I've interviewed on the Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders podcast has had a gift for our listeners, and that includes my very special guest today, Rachel Cossar. And what we've done is we've taken all of those gifts and we put them together all in one place just for you. We call it the Salesology Vault. and it is packed full of free gifts from sales leaders, sales experts, marketing gurus, revenue generation experts. And we add another gift every single week. We release a podcast every Monday, and when we do, we add a gift. So you can log in as often as you'd like. You can download as many gifts as you'd like. It's all free. The link to the Salesology Vault is in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link, download your gifts. You'll be glad you did. And I am back with my very special guest, Rachel Cossar, who is the CEO of Virtual Sapiens. And so we have been talking, Rachel, about being intentional in what you project, whether it's video, in person, from your nonverbal communication. And so I want your opinion. Are there people that just do this like perfectly naturally and they don't have to worry about it?
I think that all of these skills can be taught. I think they can all be learned. I think they can all be embodied in a way that feels authentic. I think that there are some people who might have a more gregarious nature. They maybe feel a little more comfortable with that like outgoing, conversation-led relationship building role. But I think that there are so many frameworks and tactics that you can put in place to improve your ability to connect with someone, to build a relationship, to understand their wants, their needs, and then to present your solution as something that would be of interest to them. So I definitely think these things can be taught and learned. I think that they can be taught by talented trainers and facilitators. I also think they can be taught by AI to an extent.
Okay, well, that's a perfect segue, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about your platform.
Absolutely. So Virtual Sapiens uses AI to help professionals and sellers master their presence and communication. The way it works is our AI, not to get too technical, but our AI analyzes your web stream. So we're on this Zoom now. If you were using our AI in-call coach called Sidekick, the Sidekick would be running and analyzing you in real time and then giving you suggestions in terms of your behaviors, your nonverbal behaviors that will either help you increase your presence or at least make sure that you're avoiding certain behaviors that can really send the wrong message, right? So for example, covering your mouth with your hand, or like I said earlier, not varying your facial expressions. If you've zoned out, if someone has been kind of monologuing for a while and you need to remember to stay engaged, right? And show them that you're an engaged human on the other end and maybe gracefully interrupt, right? Like it will give you little cues like that to help the conversation go smoother. That's one example. But yeah, we provide a variety of different ways for sellers and busy professionals to get some on-demand communication and presence coaching so that they can be more impactful.
Okay. And I know you have a gift for our listeners. So tell us about your gift.
Yeah, we'd love to offer everyone or anyone who's interested a free assessment. So there'll be a link that they can activate their presence portal. And on the presence portal, you'll see there are a number of different ways to interact with our AI coach. You can do an AI role play. You can do a simulated conversation. If you have an elevator pitch or a keynote you want to practice, you can do that too. And so we'll be giving individuals one free assessment, which can be a very eye-opening experience.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I understand your gift. So people are able to have an assessment of one virtual something that they are doing, some presentation, their elevator speech, something that they're doing. Your tool will assess their nonverbal communication and give them ideas, tips that they can use to improve it.
That's right. Yeah, we do more than just nonverbal. So we'll also analyze what you say and give you feedback on your filler words and empathy and things like that. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, that just sounds incredibly valuable. Thank you so much for making that available to all of our listeners. And I know what I'm going to be doing as soon as we finish this interview. So thank you for that. And share with us, Rachel, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
The best place would be LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you just go to Rachel Cossar on LinkedIn, that's a great place to find me and interact with me.
Okay. So the link to Rachel's gift is in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, if you'd like to do Rachel's assessment, go to the show notes, click on the link. If you would like to connect with Rachel, which I recommend, that's how I met Rachel, you can connect with her on LinkedIn. And that link is also in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, connect on Rachel's LinkedIn, and connect with her. And I want to thank my very special guest today, Rachel Cossar. Will you do me a favor, Rachel, and put your hand over your heart and promise me that you'll come back another time and we can keep talking?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. This has been a delight.
And since we're audio only, Rachel put her hand over her heart and promised me. So you have been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, with my special guest, Rachel Cossar. And if you found value in listening to today's podcast, please think about one sales leader, one business owner, one entrepreneur, somebody that you know that you think might also find value in listening to this podcast. And please do share the link with them. And until we meet again, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, really large bills.
You've been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. Be sure to follow so that you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every week for more exciting insights and wisdom on transforming sales. And until next time, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, very large bills.